Misty Marris is here in the studio in New York. I mean, is what normally happens? The gag order, by the way, stays until there's a verdict in a case like this? Or?
Yeah, in a case like this where you have a gag order, and again, it's limited. It's limited to protect the witnesses and the jurors, so it's likely that that's going to be in effect all the way through when the verdict is actually read and the jury's made.
Right. I was just wondering, I guess, because we're out of witnesses, you know, that there'd be no witnesses to talk about anymore. But anyway, jury instructions. I was thinking of you when this day came because you've been screaming at us, so we listened. The whole thing is going to come down to the jury instructions. Well, here we go today. Looks like Mershon's kind of going the normal, not changing much. That's what I saw earlier, but you take it from what you've seen.
Right. So they're going back and forth, and the defense is presenting some jury instructions which go a little bit outside of what's called the pattern instructions, which are what you generally use in New York. But there's a reason for that. The reason is this is the way that this case is actually structured, with different types of statutes that are all implicated and kind of stack on top of each other. It's a bit different than what you generally see in a case like this. So they're actually arguing over some very specific language, specifically relating to potential allegations of tax crimes, relating to the election law potential violations. So all of that, they're going over what seems like these minute details, minute language changes, but they actually have large implications when it comes down to what's actually on that jury.
It's called a charge conference, right? Or charging conference.
Correct.
That's what they have. It's on our tablet here if we put it up again. Just what this meeting that we've been covering is, as Misty says, it's been, you know, minute details, but it's just a judge and lawyers trying to develop a jury charge. And I was pointing this out earlier, that it's really this part, the jury charge that we have listed down at the bottom, the instructions to the jury about the law, its application, and the weighing of evidence for deliberation. So in particular, election law, right? Is it true, because a lot of people have said it today, that can be, you know, even if you know the law pretty well, but if you're not a lawyer, there are two lawyers, by the way, on this jury, but if you're not a lawyer, that can be a little complicated.
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
Election law is very niche. It's very specific, and that's one of the reasons why Trump wanted to call an election law expert as part of the defense case,
that
to
brings up a
explain
larger
some
point.
of the legal standards.
I have this guy's tweets on, back to the tablet for a moment, on this guy, Brad Smith is who you're talking about.
Correct.
He's had this long list of tweets. We showed some of them last hour. I'm letting them scroll through to make a larger point. He's the election law expert, and he was talking about how even Antonin Scalia didn't necessarily understand that. But, you know, if we bring it up here, you pause it on that one with someone, the second one on the screen. Someone had to bring this knowledge, not the law, but this knowledge. That was my intended testimony. For example, part of the state's case is they wrongly reported what they knew to be a campaign expenditure in order to hide that payment until after the election. So, Misty, you can pick up from there. You see the scroll continues, and Cohen even testified they wanted to get past the election. And then after that, he goes into some of the dates. See October 27th down there, for example. I'll pause it again. I'm kind of just talking about this particular tweet, at least in here. Talk about October 27th, they made the money. You know, they're sending the money to Stormy Daniels. Not under law would that be reported till December 8th, after the election. He wanted to make these points. That's how the law works. And they didn't, you know, he wasn't going to be allowed to do that.
Right. So here was the issue. So the judge said that he could actually testify, but it was incredibly limited. He could only testify about the role of the Federal Election Commission, what that agency is, and about specific definitions in the law that are just kind of black and white. He could not testify about any way that the law is applied, or exactly what you're pointing out right now, the requirements and what makes something subject to the FECA, which makes it subject to that act and requires reporting and those reporting requirements. So once you eliminate that, it was really useless for them to put
it was useless to bring him up, right? But where does that leave the jury? Does that leave a jury that doesn't have all the information it needs? With maybe the exception, again, of these two lawyers? I don't know.
It's really, really confusing. So what they're actually battling back and forth, the prosecution wants to do what's called a but-for test. But for the election, this payment to Stormy Daniels wouldn't have happened. That's kind of a broad standard. It's a causation standard. You hear it a lot in civil law. What the defense wants to say is more akin to what the election law says, is that if this obligation, this type of payment for hush money, were to exist outside of an election, then it cannot be subject to the election law. So that's the type of thing I'm talking about. That's a small tweak when you hear it from the layman's perspective. From the legal perspective, It's a huge difference.
But is McShane going to specifically talk about that in his instructions?
Yes, so actually he reserved decision. They were just battling that out right now as I was waiting to come on air. At the charging conference, that was a huge point of contention. He reserved decision, and he's going to make some sort of jury charge relating to that election law standard, and that will be in the jury instructions.
All right, because now they're getting into the Access Hollywood tape. I'm reading now from our producers at the courtroom a little bit, and they're talking about how any kind of bias would be introduced. But you're saying he's not going to make that very, very important judgment right now. That could decide. Is that? I mean, sometimes we tend to exaggerate, us media types, but that's make or break.
Well, it's one of the issues. So there's 3 different predicate crimes, operative crimes that underlie the fraudulent business records, right? So there has to be for the purpose of covering up another crime. One is the New York State election law crime, conspire to prevent or promote an election through unlawful means. What are the unlawful means? Well, there's 2 buckets: potential tax crimes, and that election law issue. So both of those are going to be articulated in the jury charges. And that's why I say it's very confusing. And even with 2 lawyers, it's a lot to parse through.
Yeah, 2 out of the 12 are lawyers. All right, a final thing. You think there's a favorite here going to closing arguments in prosecution or defense if you had to pick, or is it even Steven?
You know, I really thought after Michael Cohen's testimony yesterday where he said he stole $60,000 from the Trump organization, and not only that, money that is directly related to the payments that are at issue in this case.
Yeah.
I said, geez, I think you might get a couple of jurors who are going to say, I can't believe anything this guy says.
Misty, first of all, don't say geez, and don't give me the side eye. Did you see that? That was actually in the... Oh, yeah.
That was good. I loved it.
We'll be here all week. But that was literally in the transcript from yesterday when this guy Costello came up. But anyway, you said that, and then what? So you changed your mind, or you still think that?
I'm thinking I really could see a hung jury here, Connell, because I think that you might have a couple of holdouts who say, I don't know if I want to take Michael Cohen at his word, and Michael Cohen's word is really, really important for this case from the prosecutor's perspective.
All it takes is one to hang the jury.
That's it.
Misty, thank you very much for all your coverage on this. It's 11.